Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to today's Dharma talk. And as I was mentioning earlier, uh, this Dharma talk is about the importance of connection, basically. And a few months ago, I was asked to be on a panel for a conference that was situated in Malaysia, and I was just going to be on a panel, and the panel was going to be on something called loneliness in the digital age. And as it turned out, I couldn't attend that conference, but I did say that I would do a Dharma talk on something related to that topic. So also, as I mentioned earlier, I was asked on that to go on that conference because of my background with clinical psychology as well as Buddhist psychology. And when I thought about it, I really thought that you really can't talk about loneliness without talking about the importance of connection. Uh, and the importance of friendship. So, in addition, I thought, regardless of what age we're in, whether in the Stone Age, the time of the Buddha, or the digital age, the experience of loneliness and the importance of connection and friendship is perennial. So, in regards to the psychosocial impact of the digital age, I haven't done any research, I haven't read any papers or even thought about it a lot, but so I can't really provide any empirically validated view other than just some reflections that I've had and some observations that I had. So in this talk, I'll firstly consider what loneliness may be, and I'll mention some observed pros and cons about digital connection. And then for the most part of the talk, I'll focus on the importance of human connection and friendship from a clinical psychologist's perspective, but also from a Buddhist perspective. So I thought, wow, what's loneliness? And I was thinking about it, how I experience loneliness. So I looked up Wikipedia. And Wikipedia says this about loneliness. Loneliness is an unpleasant emotional response to perceived isolation. Loneliness is also described as social pain, a psychological mechanism which motivates individuals to seek social connections. It is often associated with a perceived lack of connection and intimacy. Loneliness overlaps yet is distinct from solitude. Solitude is simply a state of being apart from others, and not everyone who experiences solitude feels lonely. As a subjective emotion, loneliness can be felt even when a person is surrounded by other people. Of course, Wikipedia goes on to say lots more about loneliness. Nonetheless, I think that paragraph provides some key points. So we have loneliness. What we have with loneliness is that it is painful. And it's also perceived as isolation. And it is distinct from solitude. I think that last point is pretty relevant when we think about uh, the idea of connection and loneliness in Buddhist meditation practices, because there's a lot of meditation practices and a lot of Buddhist meditation practitioners are in solitude. So I remember before the digital age, when I was in my early 20s, I was traveling in a strange city. And despite being surrounded by all sorts of people, I felt lonely. I also remember being a monastic in the forests of Thailand before there were computers, before there were even mobile phones, mostly in solitude. But I was not lonely. Rather, I felt a sense of belonging and connection to the community, to the Sangha, and also something much greater. I really felt a tangible sense of being connected to common humanity when I was practicing in the forest, often in solitude. And these days of internet and sometimes instant connection have both pros and cons in terms of our sense of isolation and loneliness. I know that video calls can make possible to stay connected with emotionally and spiritually with friends and relatives far and near, almost instantaneous. I have a regular Zoom call with a friend I met on the CEB course about 15 years ago. Um, he lives in the Netherlands. We chat about every month, about once a month, once every 6 weeks. It's fantastic. And I know that also uh, video calls can make possible to stay not only connected with dear friends and family. I mean, I often Skype with my kids, Zoom call with my kids and my grandchildren. Um, but also it makes possible the experience of connection with Sangha, like this, what we're having now. We've got people from Western Australia, South Australia, uh, Adelaide, Alice Springs, Melbourne, Sydney, Rockhampton, Lennox Head. We even got someone from America right now. And yeah, people from Melbourne as well. And of course, locally. I'm Tasmania. Sorry, Paul, I didn't forget you. I'm just looking around now. There's this this little sangha that we have here connected. You know, we've been going for about 4 years or 5 years or something like that. We managed to do that completely online. So, and in addition, when COVID came around, they made it possible for us to have, as a clinical psychologist, as psychologists in general, and mental health professionals, other mental health professionals, it was possible to see patients or clients digitally. We could see people online um, because Medicare permitted us to do that. And so we were able to provide emotional connection and help people in need, even in remote places, even in remote and isolated places. So being connected digitally can provide a powerful sense of connection to humanity. And we can also have digital communities, just like this one. I think I've met some people here on this community. I don't think I've ever met live, actually. I've met Elvis live. Don't know about you, Amy. Have I ever met you live? No. There you go. Have I met you, Summer? Have I met you live? Oh, there you go. Oh, neither Danielle either. Well, there you go. We have we have this wonderful connection, all because of the digital age. Isn't that lovely? Have I met you live, Jane? Oh, good. Yeah, you're right. And I definitely haven't met you live, Kate. Cat, sorry. So there's so many wonderful things that have come about from in the digital age in relationship to loneliness and connection. Uh, there are, however, also many cons and possible problems with digital connection. For example, this is only something I was hearing on the radio and I thought about, and it's quite true. Children who have too much screen time in general, and may not learn the basic skills of communication and emotional development. Being fixed to a screen can take away from real-time exposure to facial expressions, for example, especially if the people are not even connecting uh, with video cameras, for example. Uh, and also, if they're not even talking, like if they're doing, whatever they call it, messaging, um, they won't even hear another person's voice. So I know that part of our emotional and mental development is based on being able to see people's faces, facial expressions, and for people who are blind, hear voice tone. In this way, we develop an understanding of emotions and what another person's emotions may be, what emotions another person may be experiencing. So The digital age has taken that away, and a lot of people are suffering from that. Um, and that's so important for us not only to understand emotions, but also to have meaningful relationships. And also, the possibility of being abused, harassed, and shamed online has now become a cause of much suffering, whereas previously it was not as easy to do. Well, it wasn't possible to do it online, of course. Um, and of course, these potentials for healing, growth, and connection, as well as the abuse, harm, isolation, and loneliness that is possible from being connected or disconnected, have always been there. Perhaps the difference right now in our digital age is that it's just so much more possible. The potential is so much greater and is so much more accessible. So, on another issue, I've always been relieved when I've been able to talk to someone when I've got a problem with one of my services, like electricity or telephone or something like that. And what's really disappointing often is I get recorded messages and directed to frequently asked questions. I don't know how frustrating that is for other people, but I find that very frustrating. I really would like to connect with someone. I really like to talk to a human, another human. And also, I've been wondering about AI, and I'm really not sure. Despite the many wonderful claims about AI, there's something definitely missing when one is unable to speak live with a person. I recently got a new phone. It's a Google Pro. I'm not doing an advertisement here. It's a Google 9 Pro XL or something like that. And oh, look at that. It responded to GOOGLE. And that's AI. That's AI. I was talking to AI. Did you hear that voice? That was an AI voice. And despite it being accurate and very helpful, by the way, my Google phone comes with a year's subscription to Galaxy, which is the AI program on Google phones. So, or on yeah, on Google and on Google in general, actually. So, despite the many wonderful claims, there is definitely something missing when you're not talking to a live person. I think relationships depend on consciousness to consciousness. So I'm pretty cautious about when I hear about how I uh, could do all sorts of things, like for example, make ethical decisions. I mean, I'm imagining that they will try to get AI to make ethical decisions on things. I reckon that requires something significant, something being human and conscious to understand all uh, those contingencies. And also, I imagine they're probably having AI teach meditation now. I know there's all sorts of apps around that teach meditation without a personal connection. And also, I imagine that us mental health professionals could be one day replaced. I know that there was a lot of uh, programs, you know, online programs for mental health, but I like to think that when I'm seeing someone and having a therapeutic relationship, I think that the therapeutic relationship definitely has a positive impact. There's something about that. So, uh, regardless, regardless of all that, the suffering of loneliness and the importance of connection has always been there. Moreover, we humans evolved to be connected. And this is evident in our biological, neurological, and social systems. I'm just going to talk a little bit about um, uh, it's polyvagal theory, sorry. I'll talk a little bit about polyvagal theory in that right now. So according to some neuroscientists, we each have three brains. The three brains are in the region of our head, our heart, and our guts. Each have motor neurons, sensory neurons, neurotransmitters, and ganglia. They each take in information, process it, as well as store it for later access when needed. This is why they're called three brains. That's what a brain does. Um, these different brains are connected with the dorsal and ventral branches of the vagal nerve. And the vagal nerve is one of the 12 cranial nerves. It comes from our brain down to our guts, for example. Vagal means wandering. So this vagal nerve has multiple branches and it kind of wanders all over the place. And it travels to and from the head brain, down to our gut, and in and around our hearts. So Stephen Porges developed polyvagal theory to explain how we survive, thrive, and connect via the functions of what he called the polyvagal nerve. Well, one could say polyvagal nerves or something like that. And this understanding has helped and been picked up by contemporary clinical psychology to help us understand how we can work with the fight, flight, and freeze responses, as well as how we use the systems of social connection to soothe us, to reassure us, to protect us, to bond, and fulfill our needs of being a human. The dorsal or back part of the brain, back part of the nerve goes right down into our guts. And there's a lot I can talk about all that, how we have a gut response to something. And in our guts, I feel like this, or we have some guts is like having courage. And the ventral or front part of the nerve goes in and around our heart. And our human systems have evolved to respond to challenges in order to survive, thrive, and communicate, actually. And there is a hierarchy of responses that follow increasingly sophisticated coping mechanisms that have evolved. And according to Deb Dana is a clinician who who started to look how we can use polyvagal theory in a clinical way. And she's written quite a lot, and she gives a lot of, there's a few YouTubes and courses around with her. Anyway, at the bottom of the ladder, we have what has its roots far back in our evolutionary history. And the top of the ladder is more like in recent human evolution. So far back in our evolutionary history, at a time we shared our roots with reptiles, something called the dorsal vagal response had survival value. And this is when we faint, collapse, withdraw, dissociate, shut down, or cut ourselves off from things in order to cope. I mean, you've probably seen this, what is the word, like the deer in headlights. You heard of that comment, the deer in headlights, or when sometimes if there's a mouse in the room, you look around the room and you can't see it because it's so still. Fortunately, we don't have any mice up here. We haven't had mice up here for a while now. But anyway, and this particular freeze response continues to be a helpful coping skill mechanism at times. Unfortunately, many of us humans get stuck in it, and this avoidant coping mechanism is no longer useful. In fact, this form of avoidance can become pathological as something called clinical dissociation. Sometimes we just cut off and space out. We're not present for experience. So higher up in the evolutionary ladder, we develop sympathetic fight or flight responses. And you probably know about the fight or flight responses. It's like this. It's like the ways we deal with danger. And when we have danger, we can either get ready to fight it, or we can get ready to flight it, like move away from it. And our system equips us with increased adrenaline, in order to breathe quickly, and the sweat response and all sorts of things happen in our system in order for us to be able to do that. And this is, of course, has been very helpful for us to survive. Uh, Even in our modern time, if we didn't have fear, we may not have even crossed roads safely. Like, the fear response is very natural. You know, if we suddenly saw a truck coming towards us when in the middle of the road, we would run. We wouldn't think about it. We wouldn't calculate how fast that truck is going and the probability of it hitting me and, flattening me out on the pavement. We would just get out of there. So it's been very helpful. Um, and however, sometimes its usefulness has been outlived. Well, a lot of times in modern society, its usefulness has outlived. And it's become not very balanced and overreactive. Cortisol, which is the main hormone for stress, in short bursts, it's very helpful. Like, that burst of adrenaline to run away from the truck that's coming our way, or, if we're going on a walk through a paddock and there's a bull starting to charge us, to get out of the road. But if it happens all the time or too regularly, it becomes very unhealthy. It becomes, um, yeah, it can cause all sorts of conditions actually. And on a mental health level, the the basis of most anxiety disorders, for example, is when fear has become very unhelpful. Uh, with anxiety disorders, we tend to avoid things. So there's this adrenaline rush. We're having panic attacks, for example, or we're having a lot of discomfort, and we tend to avoid things. And anger, or that fight response, obviously out of control. It's very dangerous for self and others. So at the top of the ladder in our evolutionary development is what some scientists and clinicians have called the ventral vagal response. Remember the ventral vagal nerve I mentioned earlier? It's the one that comes down and surrounds our heart. It is where we access our capacity to feel connected with others. When we can connect, we feel healthier, more able to follow through with plans, take care of ourselves and others, and generally have a greater sense of well-being. It's like when you're feeling in a kind of community or even in a family, we feel like our backs are covered. So most importantly, this sense of connection is about not feeling alone and feeling supported with life's ordeals. Just that exercise that we did this morning about recognizing suffering as a part of life, and also recognizing that we're not alone with all this. We're connected to a greater humanity. Just that, and so then the response to soothe ourselves and heal ourselves or calm ourselves. Just that response is so helpful. Um, yeah, it's like feeling our backs are covered. When we don't feel alone, this enables us to feel safe and able to relax and recuperate. Feeling connected is an essential part of being human. And I don't need to go into all the details about children and their emotional needs and their needs to feel that someone is caring for them. I won't go into great detail about that, but without that sense of connection, we're out on a limb. If you think about what it's like to be socially rejected and the pain of being shamed, yeah, it's really terrible. So those therapists who use polyvagal theory in therapy will often encourage their clients to de-nourish and decondition unhelpful and possibly pathological responses to life's events based on redundant fight, flight, or freeze responses. And as an alternative, the therapist may point out and highlight glimpses of responses based on nourishing our sense of connection so that may be nurtured and developed and enriched. Uh, there is a hormone called oxytocin, which is also called the hug hormone. And some of you heard me talk about this before. Um, it's released in response to the needs of others and also because of our own needs to feel safe and protected. Some of you may have heard me say this many times, but a mother noticing a baby crying will feel the urge to pick up the baby, hold it close, and make soothing sounds in order to comfort the baby. At a hormonal level, oxytocin is driving the mother's response. And interestingly, when the baby is touched, held, and hears soothing tones, it doesn't have to have all of those things happening, but something, when the baby has a sense of connection, its system releases oxytocin and it soothes the baby. It soothes within itself. And over time, the baby grows through childhood, adolescence, and into adulthood. And these moments with the carer comforting distress become internalized, and the adult human has internalized its own self-soothing capacity. This is how it works. And you can imagine what happens when we don't have that through our, childhood and emotional developments, our developmental periods. We end up with all sorts of what's called attachment disruption issues. Like often, often they manifest as difficulties in relationships with people. So we humans need other humans to be human. If we feel socially rejected, isolated, estranged, banished from the tribe, shamed, or lonely, it is painful. Possibly even more painful than physical injury. Um, and this kind of sense of being connected and importance of being part of the tribe also has its pros and cons. And I won't go into details about this, but it's just something I notice. Uh, Sometimes this sense of wanting to be connected with a tribe or a cult or a particular party or whatever leads to something called tribalism, which I think, now some of you may know much more about this than I do, but tribalism is like a development of a kind of bonding within a particular tribe. And that's great. Helps us feel really good because we feel connected and we feel part of something. We feel a sense of belonging. At the same time, uh, often there's a sense of us and them, and there's a division. Like I think a lot of the football games around and sport often is developing around tribalism. And I know definitely that cults, quite harmful cults, you don't hear much about it these days, but you see this kind of cult mentality happening in politics, even where there, say, a leader or a cult leader is addressing this need to feel belonging and taking advantage of it by providing information that's absolutely maybe not even true. So, excuse me a minute. So, this sense of connection, for the most part, it's it's fantastic. And then I know even at the beginning of our this morning, some of you mentioned about how important it is for you to be part of a community and feel connected in that community, and it's mostly really fantastic. However, I think there's some that sense of belonging can be uh, can be used in harmful ways. Like, for example, I think it's behind nationalism. and also behind a lot of wars. Like it's us and them. You know, we're right, and they're wrong, and they're the enemy. So, um, on another note, uh, sometimes we can feel perfectly peaceful and content and contained and safe in solitude. And so this is where we're talking about the Buddhist perspective now. And I'm going to quote something from a sutta called Diligence here. So interpersonal relationships founded on ethics and characterized by warm friendship are important in the Buddha's Eightfold Way or the Eightfold Path. In one sutta, as I mentioned just now, called Diligence, the Buddha was talking to a king of the time, and he related a conversation he had with his attendant Ananda. Ananda was the Buddha's attendant, and Ananda didn't get enlightened actually until after the Buddha's passing, I think, or at least fully enlightened. And Ananda was there for many of the Buddha's discourses, and he would remember them, and then he would relate them to others, and um, others would remember him, and that's how the teachings of the Buddha got transmitted. It was transmitted orally. Just speaking a little bit about Ananda here. So the Ananda was by the Buddha's side a lot, and often Ananda would say something, and the Buddha would say, "No, you're wrong. You know, good try, but you're not quite right." So anyway, um, on this occasion, Ananda, and I'm just quoting the Buddha now. On this occasion, Ananda approached me, paid homage to me, sat down to one side, and said, "Venerable Sir, this is half of the holy life. That is, good friendship, good companionship, good comradeship." When this was said, great king, I told Bhikkhu Ananda, "Not so, Ananda, not so. This is the entire holy life, Ananda. That is, good friendship, good companionship, good comradeship. When a bhikkhu, and bhikkhu is a male monastic, a bhikkhini is a female monastic, but this is what is recorded in the suttas. When a bhikkhu has a good friend, a good companion, a good comrade, it is to be expected that he, and I'm going to say she or they, will develop and cultivate the Eightfold Path. And I think the Buddha was talking about here, the Buddha was talking about the importance of Sangha and also spiritual relationships. There's something in the early Buddhist approach to awakening. The only real teacher was the Buddha. Sorry, no, the Buddha was called the teacher, and everyone else were called spiritual friends. And I know in the system of the monastics, I know we used to call, when I was living in Thailand, we used to call it Achan. Achan means teacher. And there was also something else that was going on. There was having what's called the Kalyana Mit. The Kalyana Mit means spiritual friend. It's like a mentor, and the mentor is with you and guides you and helps you. And so what the Buddha's talking about here is this Kalyana Mit. That's what's important. But I also think he was talking about general ways we relate to ourselves and relate to others. And here we have what's called the four boundless divine abodes, or the four divine abodes. And of course, they are warm benevolence or warm friendliness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. And these are all important. Actually, they're often presented in a particular way. Often they're presented as warm benevolence first, or metta first, and then compassion, and then appreciative joy and equanimity. I have heard some teachers present them in different ways, and I've taught some ways. I've taught some retreats where I've presented them in different ways, like equanimity first, so that you can kind of get a stable sense of accepting the way things are, and then developing, compassion, and then developing appreciative joy, and metta is last. So I've also done it like that, and I've been taught that way as well with Stephen Snyder, the way Stephen Snyder does it with the Buddhist heart. He teaches it in that way as well. There's a few reasons for it, but I won't go into details about that right now, other than to say, when it came to general and the general way of being with others and being in life was um, mostly in consistent with metta or warm benevolence, like this general sense of warm friendliness. Like if you're going about doing your daily activities, sometimes you might feel compassion or might express compassion, and sometimes you need to experience equanimity, and sometimes you might have appreciative joy. But in general, the way of being in the world, relating to yourself and others, is most generally related to metta or warm benevolence. So the term metta, as I meant metta, sorry, I like to extend that A because there's a diacritic above the last A. It means it goes metta. You hear that extended vowel? Not often I hear people say metta, metta. And that's just metta. When we're talking about metta, it's metta. And this comes from a Pali word mitta, which means friend. And translated directly, metta refers to warm friendliness. And it's come to be known as loving kindness, benevolence. Yeah, most people have heard of loving kindness meditation. And the theme of metta is the expression of kindness, and it is the heartfelt yearning and aspiration that oneself and others find happiness and its causes. It's not sentimental goodwill or sensual personal love. It's not the type of love that's related to clinging or neediness. Rather, it is the cultivation of unconditional care, goodwill, and warm friendliness. The unconditional nature of loving kindness has been compared to a mother's love for her child. And in the Metta Sutta, you may have heard me read this, some of you, on if you've come on retreats with me. There's one stanza. When I read this, it used to make me cry every time I read it, but it goes like this. Just as a mother loves her child, her only child, in this way we can cultivate metta towards all beings. So, if you think about the unconditional nature of a mother towards her child, hopefully, uh, that's the same kind of unconditional nature we have to all beings. That's the aim. Um, so, loving kindness is an acknowledgement of the interconnection of all living beings. Loving kindness has the power to melt feelings of separateness or divisions, both within ourselves and towards the world around us. Rather than being cynical, judgmental, and finding fault with people and things, loving kindness helps us see the positive, see the wonderful, see the beautiful. Um, Loving kindness especially helps us to see the good and wholesome in people. Like, I can see, you just go out in the world and you can see people doing all sorts of weird things and sometimes harmful things. But loving kindness can help us see something good in them, something beautiful. Metta or loving kindness heals loneliness. No matter where one goes, regardless of whether one is surrounded by people, in a busy city or in solitude, one feels connected. I think I heard somebody ask the Dalai Lama, did he ever feel lonely? I mean, here the Dalai Lama was brought up in an isolated temple above everybody and, quite alone a lot. And he said, no, never feel lonely. I've got all these people in the world, billions of people I love. So connecting with loving kindness connects us with common humanity. And ill will is one of the far enemies of metta and a hindrance to meditation. Ill will, or otherwise, you could describe it as aversion. Ill will is a hindrance to meditation and progressing in life, and it often manifests as anger, also manifests as bitterness, resentment, and in Buddhism, it's considered as an affliction. Um, Often I see people who are depressed, and sometimes they're experiencing this ill will, but it's kind of directed towards themselves, like they dislike themselves, they hate themselves, or they feel like they're not deserving. Uh, yeah. So this ill will can go in two directions. It can go outward to the world or inward to oneself. Um, and it includes anger at the world, and it separates us from another. It makes us feel cut off, disconnected, and lonely. And loving kindness is the direct antidote of this affliction. When we can realize how isolating, painful, and destructive anger, which is often the way ill will uh, presents, when we can realize how destructive it is, we can feel more motivated to release this burden by beginning to make friends with it and ultimately befriending ourselves. Someone who's really angry, uh, it looks like they're kind of angry out there, but well, it, it, I saw someone who was really angry and aversive to something the other day, and I looked at them and I thought, oh, poor people, it's really so hard to be so angry and hateful, like so painful. And ultimately, it's anger towards oneself. It's hatred towards oneself. Um, Transforming anger begins with us being honestly aware of it and making a decision of kindness towards oneself and intentions to tame it. I think it begins with that. Um, when we can be open to the experience of metta, we can also begin to heal this affliction of self hatred and high self criticism, which is often related to this hindrance. So, loving kindness or metta is a remedy for fear, hatred, paranoia, and loneliness. Loving kindness has the power to of melt divisions or feelings of separateness, both within ourselves and from the world around us. Loving kindness or metta is the binding element of harmonious communities. And according to Buddhist texts and teachers, loving kindness can promote health, beauty, restful sleep, the ability to fall asleep easily, pleasant dreams, peacefulness, concentration, interpersonal harmony, and it can greatly undermine the meditation hindrance of ill will and self-loathing. So I've added self-loathing to that hindrance. There's many causes for loving kindness. Um, one cause for loving kindness is seeing that others wish to be happy just like we do, and also tuning into our deepest desire to be happy. I remember on a retreat one time, and I was behind someone who was presenting to. I was on a retreat with a Sayadaw, one of the Burmese Sayadaws, and you'd line up and go and have your daily interview with them. And I was about they'd probably be anywhere from 5 minutes to a couple of minutes to 15-minute times talking with these Sayadaws, these teachers from Burma. And person in front of me started relating something about how he wasn't able to meditate and he couldn't sit up straight and he couldn't sit there for, an hour and he was really failing and all the rest of it. And the teacher just looked at him and said, "Don't you want to be happy? Why are you doing this to yourself? Why are you beating up yourself so much? Don't you want to be happy?" And, this person kind of broke down in tears and, "Yeah, I want to be happy." He said, "Do some loving kindness. Go off and be kind to yourself. So don't forget about, how you must do this practice, you're sitting still for whatever it is. Just be kind." So, where am I? I've lost my track. According to, I've done that one. A cause for loving kindness is the recognition that all beings just want to be happy. Like we all don't want to suffer. We all don't want to. We all don't want to be caught up in psychological pain. We all want to be happy, and that's just one. That's one cause. And sometimes just remembering a person with whom we care about and feel warmly towards is enough to awaken this aspiration of loving kindness. And as I invited you to practice this morning in the warm benevolence meditation, I invited you to think of someone who brings a smile to your heart. Um, this type of person will naturally engender warm, caring feelings and thoughts. And I said this morning, and I'll repeat this now, thoughts about a teacher, a child, a good friend, a dear pet are often enough to spark and to spark this feeling of warm benevolence, to awaken the heart to love. I'm calling it love now, but I'm being very cautious about that because love is interpreted in so many different ways. So I discovered Buddhism when I was a teenager. And by the time I was 21 in 1977, way before the digital age, I traveled to Thailand intent on becoming a monk. I ordained, once ordained, I visited a number of temples to find a teacher and finally settle into the practice. In that process, I experienced a number of health issues. And having been exposed to malaria in southern Thailand, 6 weeks later, I traveled to northern Thailand to spend some time with a teacher in near Sakonnakorn, actually. And I experienced the symptoms of malaria in that temple. And it was a very, very difficult time. There were no other English-speaking monks or nuns. There were a couple of nuns there as well. The heat it was really hot. There was no electricity, no running drinking water. We had drinking water, of course, but you have to fill your little teapot with drinking water for the day, and I'd carry it off to my hut. Um, Actually, I didn't have a hut at that point, or did I? I think I might have had a. I had this kind of platform, a bamboo grove with a thatched hut. But anyway, while I was there for a little while, a couple of weeks, I got really sick. I started to experience the symptoms of malaria and ended up going to hospital and they kept me in hospital for a while. It was really horrible. Malaria is really unpleasant. Uh, but I eventually got over a little bit of it. I managed to take some medicine because I'd had malaria once before. I got it from Timor a few years earlier, and I knew how to work with it, how to treat it. And also, a doctor gave me some medicine. So I had to, after that time, I had to go back to Bangkok because I had a visa issue. So I asked if I could come back and stay, and the teacher said, "Oh yeah, okay, as long as you stop complaining." But anyway, uh, he said, "Yeah, you can come back if you want." So, um, so later on, when I came back, like 2 weeks later, I came back. Uh, by the way, he approved of me coming back, but he thought I wasn't going to come back. I think he thought this guy's experienced so much suffering. He doesn't want to return to here. It's too harsh. It's like a really harsh environment. Northeast Highland is really harsh. Can you hear my dog barking? He's protecting. He's protecting me from the lizards and the kangaroo, like the wallabies outside. So anyway, I returned a few weeks later, 2 weeks later, and when I went to pay my respects, he was so welcoming. It was incredible. He really thought that I wasn't going to return, I think. But when I went and saw him, I said, I'm back, my hands together. Bante, well, Achan. We used to call him Achan. I'm back. And he just looked at me. He looked at me and he had his eyes were just so warm with love. And he had this big smile. And all he said was, D Mark, which means very good, very good. But it was like, I mean, monks don't give hugs, but it was like he was kind of hugging me in some respects. I felt, I felt I was just melted with his loving kindness. And it seemed to pervade my beings. I was a bit stressful it was a bit stressful going back to this place where I felt really sick, but I felt completely loved and accepted. And that experience, as well as a few other experiences I had with uh, some teachers in Thailand, that stayed with me as a psychic imprint for decades. Uh, and it became my trigger or my stimulus to cultivate metta, cultivate the practice. All I'd need to do was visualize the face and the being of Achan Ban. He was later called Lumpur Ban because Lumpur means great uncle or great uh, grandfather or something like that. So all I needed to do was see him, imagine he's there, and I would feel loving kindness awaken in my heart. And these days, often I just look at my dog. He's barking at the moment, making quite a ruckus. And you can't hear it because I've got the microphone on noise suppression, but it's quite a ruckus. Even so, he's barking a lot. I still love him immensely. He has a lot of love and kindness for me. These days, what I use to spark my loving kindness is sometimes my memory of my teacher. He's long since passed away. Mostly, however, it's like beings that are in my orbit of relationships right now, like my dog sometimes, my partner sometimes, and also especially my adorable grandchildren. All I have to do is imagine their smiling faces or them seeing me and saying, "Hello, Granddad. How you going, Granddad? So good to see you," or giving me a hug. And loving kindness just springs in my heart. It's so beautiful. So, as a meditation practice, we can utilize whatever seems to work to generate these aspirations and then nourish them. Uh, Warm metta can heal the pain and isolation of loneliness and fill our hearts with a sense of interconnection and interbeing. So, when we're coming to the idea of loneliness in the digital age, um, I think that it's, like I said earlier, it doesn't matter what age we're in. Uh, we have felt loneliness. We have felt the pain of isolation as humans for thousands of years. And it is possible to heal that pain. It is possible to heal that pain with the feeling of connection. And at profound levels, when we can connect with warm benevolence, connect with spiritual paths, connect with a sangha, it's even more powerful. Um, so thank you for listening to the Dharma Talk, and may we all wake up to the reality of our sublime connections and be deeply at peace. May we all be happy, peaceful, and free. Thank you. So let's have this. I'll stop the recording and we'll have a few moments of quiet.